The $500,000 I gave you, what did you do with it? My father's voice boomed. The accusation shattered me, but as I looked across the table, my blood ran cold. It wasn't my face that was pale with guilt, it was my sister's. My name is Marianne Prescott, and my life was cleaved in two at exactly 7:43 p.m. on a cold Tuesday in November. We were seated in the grand dining room of my parents' Greenwich, Connecticut estate, a room that always felt more like a museum than a home. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware against porcelain. Then, my father, Walter Prescott, a man whose presence filled every room he entered, placed his fork and knife down with surgical precision. He looked at me, his eyes cold steel, and the world stopped. "Marianne," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "the $500,000 from the family trust I authorized for you. What did you do with it?" I froze, the wine glass halfway to my lips. My mind went blank. $500,000? What was he talking about? Across the gleaming mahogany table, my sister, Patricia, made a small, sharp sound. Her fork clattered from her hand, and the color drained from her face, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask of terror. My mother, Dorothy, gasped softly, her hand flying to her throat. In that single moment, under the weight of my father's accusation and my sister's bone-white fear, I knew my life would never be the same. This wasn't just a question, it was a verdict. If you've ever felt the ground beneath you crumble in an instant, just hit that like button. It tells me you understand what it's like when your whole world turns upside down. That question echoed in the cavernous dining room, shattering the fragile peace my family had always curated so carefully. My father's words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Before I could even form a denial, my throat tight with disbelief, the doorbell chimed, a sound as sharp and final as a judge's gavel. That's when the nightmare truly began. But before I tell you about the police, about the betrayal that ran deeper than I could ever imagine, let me properly introduce myself. As I said, I'm Marianne Prescott, and for all of my 34 years, I have been the quiet one, the steady one. The daughter who became a history teacher at a prestigious local prep school while my older sister, Patricia, conquered Wall Street. My life wasn't a headline, it was a footnote in the grand, gilded story of the Prescott family. It was a life of purpose, I thought, shaping young minds away from the cutthroat world my father and sister thrived in. I never realized that my quiet existence made me the perfect sacrifice. It's a strange thing, isn't it, how the role you play in your own family can define you for so long? Let me know. Were you ever the scapegoat too? Type fixer if you were always the one cleaning up messes. Or ghost if you were the one who felt invisible. To understand the weight of my father's accusation, you have to understand what the Prescott name means in Greenwich. It's not just wealth, it's a legacy etched into the very foundations of the town. With a family fortune valued at over $200 million, the Prescott name was synonymous with integrity, power, and an almost clinical financial acumen. My father, Walter, built his empire on a reputation for being untouchable, infallible, and he expected nothing less from his children. My sister, Patricia, was the perfect heir. She didn't just follow in his footsteps, she sprinted in them, wearing designer heels. As a vice president at a top-tier Wall Street investment fund, she was a shark in a world of sharks. Her life was a blur of Manhattan penthouses, charity galas where she'd rub elbows with billionaires, and conversations about market caps that I could never follow. She was brilliant, ruthless, and everything my father admired. And then there was me, the history teacher. While Patricia was closing multi-million-dollar deals, I was explaining the fall of the Roman Empire to teenagers. My father called my career a noble, if unprofitable, hobby. He respected it the way one respects a beautiful but useless antique. In his eyes, Patricia was building the future of the Prescott legacy, while I was simply curating its past. I had accepted this role long ago, finding my own quiet satisfaction far from the glare of Wall Street. I never imagined that this difference, this quiet path I had chosen, would one day be twisted into the perfect weapon against me. But while I had found a quiet peace in my designated role, Patricia saw only profound insult. The root of her bitterness wasn't just my father's praise, but a single, unchangeable document locked away in a safe: his will. My father, a man of rigid, almost punishing principles, had decreed that the entire Prescott estate, all $200 million of it, was to be split exactly down the middle. 50% for me, 50% for Patricia. To me, it was a testament to his love. To Patricia, it was a declaration that her ambition, her grueling 80-hour work weeks, her entire life dedicated to his world, was valued exactly the same as my hobby. I remember a blistering argument a year ago, muffled through the thick oak door of his study. "It's not equal, Dad." I heard her voice, tight with fury. "I'm the one preserving our name on Wall Street. I'm the one building on your legacy. You can't possibly think what she does is of equal value." His reply was low and final. "The Prescott legacy is built on integrity, Patricia, not just returns on investment. This conversation is over." At the time, I thought it was just a fleeting moment of frustration for her. I never understood that for Patricia, this 50-50 split wasn't about fairness. It was a scoreboard, and in her eyes, she was being forced into a tie with a player who wasn't even in the game. I didn't realize how desperately she needed to prove him wrong. This is something that cuts so deep in families, isn't it? The unspoken valuation of who you are. Let me know in the comments, were you the one who always had to prove your worth, or the one whose worth was just accepted? Type fighter if you always had to fight for it, or favorite if you never had to question it. I didn't know how deep that resentment ran, but the first tremor, the first tangible sign that something was truly wrong didn't come from my sister. It came from the one man my father trusted more than anyone: Arthur Vance. Arthur had been our family's lawyer for 40 years. He was a quiet, shrewd man who was more like an uncle to me than a legal advisor. He called me about 3 weeks before that terrible dinner. I was grading papers on the American Revolution, my apartment quiet except for the scratching of my red pen. "Just a small administrative query, Marianne," he said, his voice calm and measured as always. "I'm reviewing the quarterly trust disbursements, and I see a request processed last month. A withdrawal of $500,000 allocated for a real estate venture in Delaware. I just wanted to confirm the details with you directly." I almost dropped my pen. "Arthur, that's impossible," I said with a laugh, assuming it was a simple mix-up. "I haven't touched the trust. I wouldn't even know how. It must be some kind of clerical error on the bank's end." There was a pause on the other end of the line, just a beat too long. "I'm sure you're right," he finally said, but his voice had lost its casual tone. "I will look into it immediately. Don't you worry about it." I hung up the phone feeling slightly bewildered but quickly dismissed it. In the meticulously ordered world of Prescott finances, mistakes simply didn't happen. I had no idea that I had just been given my first and only warning. I dismissed Arthur's call as a phantom note in a perfect symphony, a simple clerical error. But in the weeks that followed, the music of our lives began to sour. The perfect, velvety facade of my family started to show cracks, and every single one of them radiated from Patricia. The first time I saw it, I was leaving a bistro downtown. I saw her across the street, huddled against the brick wall, her posture coiled with tension. Her back was to me, but I could hear the desperate, sharp whispers into her phone. Phrases like unauthorized trade and "I just need more time to cover it" drifted across the street like poison darts. She, who was always the picture of calm, corporate control, looked like a cornered animal. A few days later, my mother called, her voice thin with a worry she was trying to hide. "Marianne, dear," she began, "did Patricia mention anything to you about selling grandmother's old IBM stock? The shares she was given at her christening." I confirmed I hadn't. "It's just..." My mother hesitated. "Your sister always swore she would never part with those." It felt desperate. The unease crept into our home. My father, normally a stoic pillar of calm, became a ghost haunting his own house. He'd spend hours locked in his study, the green and red glow of a financial terminal casting long shadows on the wall. His temper grew short, his conversations clipped. He was a man watching for an enemy he couldn't see. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew these were not random events. They were aftershocks from a seismic event I couldn't yet see, and Patricia was standing at the epicenter. My sense of dread solidified into cold, hard certainty the afternoon of the dinner. I'd arrived at my parents' house early, hoping to help my mother in the kitchen, to create some small island of normalcy in the churning sea of tension. The house was unnervingly quiet. As I walked down the main hall, I heard voices from my father's library, the heart of his empire, a room paneled in dark mahogany and smelling of old leather and power. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but my father's voice, raised in a way I hadn't heard in years, stopped me cold. It wasn't just angry, it was a roar of pure, wounded fury. $500,000 is not a rounding error, Patricia, he bellowed. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. You will tell me where it went before I tear your entire life apart to find out. Patricia's reply was barely a whisper, thin and trembling. Dad, please. Not now. I will explain everything tonight. At dinner. I promise. The cold dread I'd been feeling turned to ice in my veins. I backed away from the door silently, my heart hammering against my ribs. So that was it. Arthur's phone call, Patricia's desperation, my father's rage, it was all connected to $500,000. And my sister had just promised to lay it all bare at the dinner table. I suddenly realized I wasn't walking into a family meal. I was walking into a courtroom, and the trial was set to begin at precisely 7:30 p.m. That feeling of walking into a room where you know a bomb is about to go off. It's paralyzing, isn't it? If you've ever had to sit through a family dinner holding your breath, waiting for the explosion, just type "survived" in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And so, I took my seat at the table. It felt less like a family dinner and more like the prelude to a formal execution. The dining room was immaculate, as always. The antique cherrywood table was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the flickering candlelight from a heavy silver candelabra. My mother's best china, the kind with the delicate gold trim that we only used for holidays, was laid out perfectly. The aroma of rosemary roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes, my father's favorites, filled the air, a cruel mockery of warmth and comfort. Every detail was perfect, a carefully constructed stage for the tragedy about to unfold. We ate in a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. It was broken only by my mother's desperate attempts at normal conversation. Marianne, dear, how are your students enjoying their unit on the Civil War? She asked, her smile painfully bright. I would murmur a reply, and the silence would rush back in, heavier than before. My father sat at the head of the table, a stone monarch presiding over a dying kingdom. He didn't eat, he merely dissected the food on his plate with his knife and fork. Across from me, Patricia looked like a ghost. She had a full glass of wine in front of her that she hadn't touched, and she flinched every time my father shifted in his chair. I could feel the invisible threads of tension connecting us all, pulled so taut that I was sure one of them was about to snap. And I knew, with sickening certainty, that when it did, it would be aimed directly at the heart of our family. The snap finally came. My father pushed his plate away, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. He didn't look at Patricia. He looked directly at me, his gaze pinning me to my chair. Marianne, he began, his voice devoid of all warmth, I asked you a question. He slid a slim, leather-bound folder from his side of the table. It was embossed with the golden crest of the Prescott Financial Group. The $500,000. I want an answer. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. I stammered, my voice trembling. I never received any money. He opened the folder and spun it around for me to see. My world tilted on its axis. Inside were pristine bank statements, transfer authorizations, and an application for a new account. All of it bearing my full name, my social security number, and a signature that was a terrifying forgery of my own. The documents detailed a transfer for $500,000, funneled into an account under the guise of seed funding for a high-tech educational foundation. He was using my life, my career, as the cover for this lie. This is insane, I whispered, staring at the papers. This wasn't me. I swear to you. Your signature says otherwise, he stated, his voice flat, emotionless. He had already tried and convicted me. To have the person who should know you best in the world look at you as if you're a stranger, a criminal, it's a soul-crushing feeling. If you have ever been falsely accused, If you've ever had someone twist your own life into a weapon against you, please just type the word truth in the comments. I need to feel that someone out there believes me. The room was a coffin, and my father's words were the final nails. He saw the desperate denial in my eyes and was unmoved. "This isn't just a family matter anymore, Marianne," he said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. "This is felony theft. I've already spoken to the authorities." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. My father stood, his face a grim mask. "That will be them now." My blood ran cold. Two Greenwich police officers, a man and a woman, were escorted into the dining room. The scene was surreal, the half-eaten gourmet meal, the crystal glasses, and now the stark blue of their uniforms. The female detective began, "Ma'am, based on the evidence provided by Mr. Prescott." But before she could finish, my mother stood up. Her hand, holding a linen napkin, was trembling, but her voice was clear and sharp, cutting through the suffocating tension. "Stop," she said. Everyone stared at her. My mother, Dorothy, the graceful, quiet peacemaker, had never interrupted my father in her life. "Walter," she said, her eyes locked on my father, "when you first told me about this 2 weeks ago, you were so certain it was Marianne. It didn't make sense. A mother knows her child." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a simple manila envelope, placing it on the table. "I knew something was deeply wrong in this family, so I did something you didn't. I used my own money to hire an independent forensic accounting firm from New York. I wanted an outside perspective, one not clouded by your disappointment." She pushed the envelope toward the detective. "I believe you'll find their report illuminating." The detective took the envelope, her expression shifting from procedural certainty to sharp curiosity. She pulled out a thick report, and her eyes scanned the executive summary. The silence in the room stretched, thin and fragile. After a moment, she looked up, but her gaze didn't land on me. It went directly to my sister. "Miss Patricia Prescott," the detective said, her voice now cold and official. "According to this forensic audit, the IP address used to create the fraudulent bank account in your sister's name traces back directly to your specific work terminal at your office in Manhattan." My father gasped. "What? That's impossible." "It gets worse, sir," the detective continued, her eyes still locked on Patricia. "This report also uncovered why the money was needed. It seems Miss Patricia Prescott made a series of massive, unauthorized trades using a client's institutional account. When the market turned, it created a catastrophic loss. She wasn't trying to steal $500,000. She was trying to plug a $10 million hole before the client found out." The air left the room. $10 million. The $500,000 wasn't a theft for greed. It was a desperate gasp of air from a woman who was already drowning. Framing me was her lifeboat. At that moment, Patricia completely shattered. The perfect, composed Wall Street queen dissolved into a sobbing, incoherent mess. "I was going to lose everything," she cried, burying her face in her hands. I thought I could fix it." The sister I had envied, the one my father had placed on a pedestal, was a complete stranger. Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized you didn't know them at all? That the person you believed in was just a mask? If you've ever had your world shattered by a truth like that, share this video. Because sometimes, these hidden stories need to see the light. Patricia's confession hung in the air, a toxic cloud of deceit. The moments that followed were a blur of cold, procedural horror. I watched, numb, as Officer Patel read my sister her rights against the backdrop of our family's ancestral portraits. The sharp, metallic click of handcuffs closing around her wrists in our perfect, candlelit dining room is a sound that will haunt me forever. The public fallout was immediate and brutal. Our private shame became front-page news. The Wall Street Journal ran a scathing piece titled, "The Prescott Prodigy's Poison Pill." The local Greenwich papers were even less kind, with headlines that felt like personal attacks. Our name, once a symbol of unshakable integrity, was now synonymous with scandal and fraud. The phone at my parents' house stopped ringing. Invitations were rescinded. Lifelong family friends would cross the street to avoid my mother at the grocery store. We were no longer pillars of the community, we were pariahs. And even though I was the victim, The mud splattered onto me. At my school, parents started calling the headmaster. I wasn't accused of anything, but I was now the sister of. My presence in the classroom became a distraction. With deep regret, the headmaster asked me to take a paid leave of absence, just until this all blows over. My father, the proud patriarch, became a recluse, locking himself in his library, not to manage his fortune, but to watch the legacy he had spent a lifetime building burn to the ground on the 24-hour news cycle. I had been exonerated, but I had lost everything. For weeks, I floated in a fog of shock and grief, a ghost in my own life. I was the innocent party, the victim of a calculated betrayal. Yet I was hiding in my apartment, jobless and ashamed, while the world debated the drama of my fallen family. Then, one rainy Tuesday morning, something shifted. The grief didn't disappear, but it crystallized into something else. A cold, hard diamond of anger. The injustice of it all, of losing my career, of my father's blindness, of Patricia's willingness to sacrifice me, became my fuel. I would not be a footnote in my sister's story. I decided I would write the final chapter myself. This was the beginning of one of those real-life family revenge stories you only read about. I called Arthur Vance. When I walked into his quiet, book-lined office, he looked at me with pity, but that faded when he saw the look in my eyes. "I'm not here for a shoulder to cry on, Arthur," I said, my voice steady. "The police will handle the criminal charges. That's their justice. I'm interested in the other kind. The kind that ensures there is no redemption tour, no comeback story for her in 5 years." I laid out my plan. Patricia's entire world was built on her reputation as a financial genius. I wanted to expose the truth so thoroughly, so publicly, that the myth of Patricia Prescott would be dismantled forever. Arthur listened, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Your father built his empire on numbers," he said. "But you, Marianne, you understand strategy." Together, we began. We spent the next 2 weeks meticulously compiling every document, every email, every piece of the puzzle into a devastatingly clear narrative of her crime. There's a moment when the tears dry up and the fire starts. Have you ever felt that switch flip, where you decided you were done being the victim? If you know that feeling, that moment you decided to fight back, I want you to write "my turn" in the comments below. Let's create a chorus of strength. After 2 weeks of sleepless nights fueled by coffee and a righteous fury, our work was done. What lay on Arthur's desk was not just a stack of documents, it was a weapon. I had used my skills as a historian to assemble a perfect, chronological dossier detailing Patricia's crime, from the initial unauthorized trade to the meticulous forgery of my signature. Each piece of evidence was tabbed, each event cross-referenced. It was a thesis on the anatomy of a betrayal. We didn't go to the police. We aimed for a higher court, the court of public record. Arthur identified our target, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the New York Times, a man famous for dismantling the careers of corrupt Wall Street titans. We didn't want a gossip piece. We wanted a clinical, undeniable takedown. I mailed the package from a post office 3 towns over, wearing gloves, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. There was no return address. It was a single, irreversible act. For 10 days, silence. Then, the bomb dropped. A front-page, multi-part exposé began, with a headline that shook the financial world. "Inside the Prescott Fraud: How a Wall Street Star Gambled, Lost, and Sacrificed Her Sister." The article was a masterpiece of destruction. It laid out the crime in excruciating detail, prompting an immediate, high-profile investigation by the SEC. It wasn't just a family drama anymore. It was a case study in corporate malfeasance. Patricia's firm fired her via a public statement. She was barred from the industry for life. The police would decide her freedom, but I had already taken her legacy. It wasn't a loud, screaming victory. It was a quiet, somber checkmate. The public storm eventually subsided, leaving behind the quiet, difficult work of sifting through the wreckage of our family. The headlines faded, but the silence in my parents' house remained. One Sunday afternoon, I found my father sitting alone in his library, not reading the Wall Street Journal, but staring out at the manicured lawns that now felt like a gilded cage. He looked older, smaller somehow, adrift in his leather armchair. He knew it was me who sent the documents. He never asked, and I never told, but he knew. Marianne, he said, his voice raspy, not meeting my eyes. I spent 40 years building a legacy on market predictions, on returns, on a name that commanded respect. You showed me it was all hollow. An empty suit. He finally turned to look at me, and for the first time, I didn't see a titan of finance. I saw a father, humbled and broken. Your integrity, he said, the words catching in his throat. Your quiet, unshakable strength. That is the real Prescott legacy. I was a fool not to see it. And I am so profoundly sorry for a lifetime of blindness. It wasn't a magic fix. It didn't erase the years of feeling second best or the horror of his accusation. But it was a start. It was the truth. In the months that followed, my school reinstated me, my name fully cleared. Patricia was sentenced to 5 years in a federal facility. Our family was shattered, but the lies that had held it together were shattered too. From the pieces, we began the slow, painful process of building something new. Something real. The path to healing is never a straight line. It's a quiet, often lonely road of rebuilding, not just your life, but your very understanding of the world. My revenge, born from a place of deep pain, didn't bring me triumphant joy. Instead, it brought a somber clarity. It forced my family to confront the toxic mythology we had lived by for decades. The myth of the perfect daughter and the overlooked one. The false idol of financial success, and the corrosive nature of unspoken resentments. Patricia's crime was the earthquake, but the fault lines had been there for years, hidden just beneath the surface. True justice, I learned, isn't just about punishment. It's about revealing the truth, however ugly, so that something healthier can grow in its place. Forgiveness is an even more complicated terrain. I don't know if I can ever truly forgive my sister for her willingness to sacrifice me, but I am learning to forgive my father for his blindness and myself for my years of quiet complicity. We are a family redefined by scandal, but in that destruction, we were given a strange, painful gift, a second chance to build a legacy based not on wealth or reputation, but on honesty and resilience. Sometimes, you must burn the old house down to see the moon. The cost is immense, but the view is finally clear. This journey has taught me that our deepest wounds can often lead to our greatest strengths. If my story has resonated with you, if it has given you a sense of hope or validation in your own struggles, please consider subscribing to this channel. This is a space for the stories that need to be told, for the quiet voices that deserve to be heard. Together, we can turn pain into power.